Elias Vance, a quiet but intensely focused doctoral student at the esteemed Thorne Institute for Advanced Computing, just completed the most significant work of his life. His thesis, Temporal Pattern Recognition in Autonomous Systems, detailed an AI algorithm capable of predicting complex market and systemic failures up to 18 months in advance, a revolutionary capability worth hundreds of millions in the financial sector alone. It was not just an academic paper, it was a genuine, revolutionary piece of technology built through 4 years of grueling, solitary work. He entrusted the final, clean, and meticulously commented code, along with the full mathematical proof, to his supervisor, Professor Alastair Thorne. Thorne was the head of the institute and a celebrated figure. Elias looked up to Thorne, seeing him as a mentor and intellectual partner. Elias made the first, and most crucial, mistake born of trust. He uploaded the complete, finalized code and all supporting documentation directly to Thorne's secure personal server, believing it was the required final step for his doctoral review. For the next 2 weeks, Thorne became a ghost. Office hours were abruptly cancelled, emails inquiring about the submission status were met with terse, auto-generated replies or simply ignored. The first wave of real anxiety hit when he tried to access the thesis drafts folder on Thorne's internal shared drive to check a historical comment he'd made. The system immediately bounced him out, access denied. His personal, student-level permissions to the shared drive had been subtly, yet definitively, revoked. A seasoned coder, Elias knew this wasn't a glitch, it was a deliberate action. Thorne was creating a digital barrier, separating Elias from his own intellectual property before the official submission date. This barrier, erected in silence, was the first concrete sign that the man Elias trusted was planning a betrayal. Elias's quiet paranoia quickly turned into cold, hard certainty. Using a secure, off-campus terminal and specialized network analysis tools, Elias monitored the activity associated with Professor Thorne's private IP address. He watched as massive data chunks, the exact size and metadata matching his thesis code, were moved, copied, and repacked into a new project structure, all under Thorne's access credentials. This was not a review, it was a systemic seizure. The final, crushing confirmation came in the form of an internal university development memo. It announced with much fanfare that Professor Alastair Thorne had submitted a brand new, highly competitive grant proposal to the National Science Foundation, NSF. The project was titled, The Thorne Predictive Model, a Novel Approach to Temporal System Analysis, with a requested initial funding amount of $5 million. The attached public abstract was a near-verbatim copy of the summary Elias had written for his thesis. Thorne wasn't just planning to steal the credit for the research, he was planning to steal the funding, the patents, and the professional future built upon Elias's genius, leaving Elias with an irrelevant, unoriginal degree. Thorne had orchestrated the perfect, quiet crime, banking on Elias's junior status and the university's incentive to protect its star professor and potential $5 million grant. The final act of calculated insult occurred when Thorne, reversing his cold silence, summoned Elias. He was overly gracious. "Elias, your thesis is, as I thought, stellar. Approved. However, given the sensitivity of the subject and the grant potential, I've decided to rush the publication in a new, high-impact journal, co-authored by us. I'll make sure you get a generous publication bonus and a primary author credit on the dissertation itself." Thorne's plan was transparent, secure the academic credit and the grant immediately, while silencing Elias with a meaningless co-authorship token and a small amount of money. The most damning evidence, the original thesis's uniqueness, would be erased once the work was officially attributed to Thorne. Elias, cold with righteous fury, accepted the co-authorship offer with a simple, emotionless nod. "That sounds excellent, Professor," he replied. Thorne, smugly focused on his successful deception, completely missed the calm finality in Elias's voice. Elias knew he needed this co-authorship to ensure the version Thorne submitted contained the final, identical code, thus setting the perfect, inescapable trap. Elias realized that fighting Thorne in the analog world was useless. His revenge had to be as meticulous and structural as his code. His weapon was a single, highly specific, almost invisible line of code he had deliberately embedded deep within the recursive function of the core algorithm months before. This line was disguised as a necessary, complex debug loop, something any casual reviewer would assume was just part of the intensive AI optimization. But its true function was to act as an intellectual fingerprint. This single line contained a highly unique cryptographic marker that generated an output hash unique only to Elias's original, timestamped thesis file. Crucially, the hash creation was linked to the creation metadata of the source document, timestamping his intellectual ownership months before Thorne ever gained access. By agreeing to the co-authorship and obtaining Thorne's finalized Thorne predictive model paper, Elias had secured the first piece of the evidence chain, the stolen property itself, complete with the embedded truth. With Thorne's stolen draft in hand, Elias had the proof of what was stolen. Now he needed irrefutable proof of when it was stolen. He needed the server logs. Accessing the server room at the Institute was restricted, but Elias still possessed the necessary emergency system credentials. He waited until a rainy, late Saturday night, accessed the heavily protected physical server rack, and located the deep archive of server audit logs. Meticulously sifting through the raw data in his off-campus hideout, he found the smoking gun, a detailed, irrefutable record showing Thorne's personal terminal transferring and subsequently deleting Elias's original thesis file on the exact date and time Thorne had revoked his access. The log confirmed malicious intent and provided the timeline. The chain was complete, the cryptographic hash proving ownership was linked to the creation metadata of the thesis, and the server log proved the physical act of theft. This combination of the encrypted timestamp, the server log, and the physical stolen paper created an unbreakable, undeniable case against academic fraud. Elias knew that presenting his case to the dean, Harold Mason, would result in a cover-up to save the $5 million NSF grant. Elias needed the nuclear option, the University Ethics Committee, chaired by the notoriously rigorous and unflinching Dr. Vivian Chen. He meticulously compiled his entire case into a single, comprehensive, and digitally secured package, structured as a legal brief, and sent it via secure, encrypted email to Dr. Chen's private university account, and a physical copy was delivered by a registered courier. The final stage of Elias's preparation was designed to remove any doubt that he was merely a disgruntled student seeking blackmail. Elias officially resigned from the Thorne Institute the next morning. He didn't offer a polite excuse or any room for negotiation. His official email to the dean and Thorne simply stated, "I am terminating my doctoral candidacy and my association with the Thorne Institute due to irreconcilable ethical differences regarding intellectual property ownership. I will not be returning to the lab." This abrupt, formal resignation was a declaration of war, a signal that Elias was acting from a position of principle, not a desire to remain in the system. Thorne, now preparing feverishly for his major NSF grant presentation, was stunned and slightly annoyed, but ultimately dismissed it. He assumed Elias was just having a temper tantrum and that the university administration would swiftly handle the minor disturbance of a resigning student. He still believed he had bought Elias's silence with the hollow co-authorship promise and that his tenure protected him from any real consequence. The dean, likewise, was only focused on mitigating the risk to the grant. They were both oblivious that the most dangerous phase of the confrontation was about to begin. The stage was set, Thorne's grand presentation, the moment he would secure the $5 million grant and cement his fraudulent legacy, was scheduled for the following afternoon, unaware that Dr. Vivian Chen already possessed the unassailable evidence of his crime. Elias had set the perfect digital trap and was now waiting for the precise moment of maximum exposure to spring it. The next afternoon, the auditorium was hushed and expectant. Professor Thorne was impeccably dressed, radiating the supreme confidence of a man about to deliver a career-defining, multi-million-dollar presentation. He began his presentation of the Thorne predictive model to the National Science Foundation, NSF, grant committee, with Dean Mason, whose eyes were fixed solely on the $5 million prize, in attendance. Thorne delivered Elias's findings with polished academic eloquence, easily navigating the complex mathematical proofs and AI modeling concepts. The dean beamed proudly, the grant money seemed certain. Thorne, eager to impress, displayed the core recursive algorithm on the main screen, ready to walk the committee through the genius behind the breakthrough. Just as he was about to speak the crucial words to secure the grant, the heavy auditorium door opened with a decisive thud. Dr. Vivian Chen, flanked by two senior members of the university's Legal and Ethics Council, walked in, her face etched with severe disapproval. The dean, sensing the immediate, massive threat to the university's funding, jumped to his feet. "Dr. Chen, this is a confidential NSF presentation. You are not permitted to interrupt." Dr. Chen, ignoring the frantic dean, walked directly to the podium. "I apologize to the National Science Foundation representatives," she stated, her voice resonating clearly. "But the University Ethics Committee has received an extremely serious, fully documented allegation of intellectual property theft concerning the work being presented. By the authority granted to the Ethics Committee, I am halting this presentation and placing the Thorne predictive models under immediate, external forensic audit." Thorne, standing next to the screen displaying Elias's stolen code, went completely pale. The NSF representatives, instantly recognizing the severity of the situation, immediately tabled the grant application, freezing the funding process. The room was plunged into a stunned silence. Dr. Chen then addressed Thorne directly, holding up a printout of the server audit log. "Professor Thorne, we have a fully authenticated digital record of the paper you submitted. We now require you to confirm the functionality of your code using the original source file." She handed Thorne a secure, network-isolated laptop preloaded with Elias's original thesis file. Thorne, paralyzed by fear and confusion, mechanically followed the instructions, opening the file that contained the stolen code. He ran the simple diagnostic command, unaware that the core of the function was about to betray him. The laptop screen flickered. Instead of the expected debug output, a small, new window popped up. It was the result of Elias's secret embedded code. The window displayed 2 lines of text, clearly visible to the entire audience: original author, Elias Vance, and creation time, date, time months before Thorne's grant application. The window then displayed the cryptographic hash generated by the unique debug line, a hash that matched the one contained in Elias's personal, archived copy. The dean was speechless. Thorne, looking at his own submitted algorithm code, realized the elegant, simple trap. Elias had not fought the theft, he had built the evidence of his ownership directly into the stolen property. The very code Thorne claimed as his own was now screaming the name of the true author. Thorne tried one final, desperate move. "This is tampering. Sabotage. Vance is a disgruntled student trying to ruin me." Dr. Chen calmly placed the server audit log printouts on the table. "Professor, the audit log shows you transferring and deleting Mr. Vance's thesis file just prior to your grant submission. Your actions confirm that you attempted to erase the original source material. We will now run the code audit with an independent third-party firm. Your academic privileges are suspended, effective immediately." The NSF representatives, seeing irrefutable proof of academic fraud, stood up and quietly left the room. Thorne, his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper, finally understood the scale of his downfall. The single line of code was the perfect digital fingerprint, turning his attempt at intellectual murder into the most humiliating public academic suicide. The academic scandal was massive. The story broke across international science news: famed professor busted for multi-million-dollar thesis theft by brilliant student. The university immediately went into damage control. The dean, facing a complete loss of face and funding, had no choice but to throw Thorne under the bus. Thorne was permanently stripped of his tenure, his institute was shut down, and he faced potential criminal charges for grant fraud. The $5 million NSF grant was officially rescinded. The focus shifted entirely to the genius of Elias Vance, the student who had silently set the trap. The academic community, which once revered Thorne, now shunned him entirely. Days after the scandal erupted, throwing the university into chaos, the desperate Dean Harold Mason summoned Elias to his office. The dean, previously aloof and arrogant, was now visibly frantic, his face pale with stress. The loss of the $5 million grant, coupled with the international media firestorm, had severely damaged the university's reputation. The dean offered a full, immediate apology and a massive settlement. "Elias, what Thorne did was an absolute betrayal of trust, and for that, I am deeply sorry. The university failed you. We will make it right. We will give you a full, immediate doctorate, a tenured position, and make you the youngest director of the newly renamed institute. But we need to salvage this. We need to save the research and, frankly, our reputation. You must resubmit the grant under your name. We cannot lose that funding. The dean, appealing to Elias's academic ambition, laid out a contract detailing an incredibly lucrative future. Elias, however, remained completely unmoved by the sudden offers of status and money. He had seen the dean's true loyalty to the money, not the ethics. "You didn't care about the ethics, Dean," Elias said, his voice quiet but steady, cutting through the lavish promises. "You only cared about the $5 million. You enabled Thorne's power by letting him operate without oversight. My work is not a commodity to be used to bail out your reputation." Elias's refusal was a calculated move. He wasn't interested in their prepackaged corporate redemption story. He wanted systemic, permanent change, and the dean's desperation was his leverage. He knew that for his revenge to be complete, it had to restructure the very power dynamics that had allowed Thorne to thrive. Elias returned to the dean's office the following day, not with a counteroffer, but with a list of non-negotiable terms that restructured the academic power system itself. The dean, recognizing that Elias was the only person capable of salvaging the situation, reluctantly agreed to hear them. Elias's demands were not centered on his personal wealth or status, but on accountability and institutional reform. The full $5 million grant redirection. The grant funding must be immediately secured, not to be managed by the university's development office, which Elias saw as corruptible, but by an independent, externally managed research foundation dedicated solely to ethical AI development and transparent research practices. Public academic censure. Professor Thorne must be publicly and permanently censured by the University Senate, ensuring his disgrace was officially recorded and irreversible within the academic community. Dr. Chen's promotion. Dr. Vivian Chen, the head of the ethics committee who had taken the risk to expose Thorne, must be promoted to the Dean of Academic Ethics, ensuring her moral rigor had true administrative power and oversight over all research activities. The renaming and reforming of the institute. Elias would accept the doctorate and the title of director, but his first official act would be to rename the institute, the Vance Institute for Ethical Systems, dedicated to transparent coding, open-source principles, and, crucially, guaranteeing students full intellectual property rights from day one. The dean, facing ruin and desperate to restore some semblance of order and to secure the grant money for the school, albeit indirectly, had no choice but to agree to every single demand. Elias had not just won a personal battle, he had engineered an institutional revolution. The university held a final, solemn ceremony. Elias Vance, now officially Dr. Vance, received his degree and was formally installed as the director of the newly established institute. His first keynote speech was not a celebration of his personal success, but a condemnation of the old culture. "The most powerful code," he declared, "is the one that enforces truth. We must never allow status or money to overshadow the fundamental integrity of our work. This institute will be a place where the work speaks for itself, and ownership is transparent." He transformed the old, secretive Thorne Institute into a beacon of transparency and accountability. All code generated was open source, and a mandatory ethics in digital ownership protocol was integrated into the curriculum. Elias had successfully secured the grant, now managed externally, the title, and the intellectual credit, but his greatest triumph was the systemic change he enacted. The university, now under the strict ethical guidance of Dean Chen, began to slowly rebuild its image, touting the new Vance Institute as a model for future academic research. Elias, now at the helm of the institution he had almost been robbed from, focused relentlessly on merit. He ensured that no student status, background, or lack of wealth would ever again be a point of weakness for exploitation by a corrupt senior figure. Professor Thorne's public and professional life was over. The prestigious journals where he had published his fraudulent work quickly retracted his papers, erasing years of supposed achievement. The academic community, which once revered him, now universally shunned him. He became the global cautionary tale for academic fraud, a reminder that in the age of digital forensics, intellectual property cannot be stolen without leaving an indelible mark. His wealth quickly evaporated as the legal fees mounted and the university successfully clawed back years of fraudulent salary and bonuses related to grant mismanagement. Meanwhile, Dr. Vivian Chen, promoted to Dean of Academic Ethics, became Elias's staunch ally, ensuring the new institute remained dedicated to its core mission. She realized that Elias's revenge was not about personal malice, but about fundamental systemic reform. He had used the digital tools of his field to enforce moral laws, something the analog academic system had utterly failed to do. She ensured the Elias Vance Protocol, a mandatory ethical coding class focused on intellectual property rights and digital proof of ownership, was immediately integrated into every science curriculum. The code that Thorne had dismissed as merely a student's work had become the cornerstone of a new educational standard, proving that the quietest form of genius, the ability to hide the truth within the data, is the ultimate source of power.